Good afternoon, a very warm welcome on this beautiful sunny day, whether you're watching live or you're in the church or you're online. If you are in the church, do carry on with what you're doing, except thank you to the group who were filming who've had to interrupt that in order for us to film this. This is one of our weekly reflections, happens each Wednesday at this time. My name's Catherine Waddams and I'm a lay minister here at St Peter Mancroft. And today I want to build my reflection on be careful what you wish for, based really on how freedom often comes with a new responsibility, and I'm going to talk about that in two rather different contexts. When people learn that I'm an economist, they tend to either change the subject very quickly or ask me about macroeconomics. What do I think will happen to growth in the economy as a whole, or interest rates, or unemployment, or inflation, things which reflect how well the country's economy is doing? And these are things about which I know very little. It's a bit like asking a historian, isn't it, about a particular piece of history to be told it's not their period. Every subject has its own area of specialisms, and sometimes the more you know about your own bit, the more you realize you don't know about the other bits. I do know something about energy prices, especially the ones we pay for our heating and lighting at home. It's rather a niche area, but one which has been in the news a lot recently, and actually I've made a living over 40 or 50 years of academic life by studying it. And I've been revisiting some of that history, the history of privatization and regulation of the energy sector in Great Britain, as part of a tribute to Stephen Littlechild, who was the first electricity regulator, a very keen proponent of privatization, which I wasn't, who devised the system which regulates the prices which the privatized industries could charge when they have monopoly power. It's a wonderfully simple idea. You encourage companies to cut costs by letting them keep any profits they make in the short term, while at the same time protecting consumers from exploitation by capping the prices that can be charged. Then, after a time, you force the companies to reduce prices so that consumers too can benefit from the cost reductions through lowering the cap on the bills. In practice, suspicion of companies, household hardship, general distrust and various energy crises have meant that the original system has been largely discredited and abandoned, at least for the prices that we pay for energy as households. There's even some nostalgia for the old nationalised industries, British gas, and it would have been Eastern electricity in this part of the world. But these did have their problems too, though we may not remember them so well through the mist of past decades and rose-tinted rear-view glasses. Renationalisation is often called for and might be a very good way of resetting the system. To some extent, privatisation did yield some benefits, including for consumers, particularly in the early days, through the same sort of reset. One of the frustrations with the old nationalised suppliers, or indeed their privatised successors, immediately after privatisation, was that we couldn't signal our disapproval by withdrawing our custom. They were the only show in town, monopoly suppliers, and we need gas and electricity to heat and power our homes. So the idea of choice, when it was given to us, was rather attractive. If only we could choose our energy suppliers, we could punish the big companies we'd grown to hate who were behaving so badly by switching to another supplier. Stephen Littlechild shared this vision of introducing competition wherever possible. Companies in this context are rewarded when they offer opportunities which the customers value. Consumers can then find an offer they prefer, whether that's in terms of price or service or something else, and switch their demand to them. The system has the beauty of most markets that no one has to discover centrally what consumers want and then make sure it's provided. We reveal our preferences through our purchases, and companies respond to them in order to make money. But it does depend on consumers being active in the market to give the companies those signals, those incentives to improve their offers, whether by price or service. We've had this choice, by the way, for 26 years, the whole of this century, indeed millennium. Well, I could take a show of hands, because there are quite a few people here in church, of how many have exercised your choice of energy supplier in the last 26 years. Can you remember? Have you changed energy suppliers? Well, a few. I've switched a few times, but I must confess to not having been as active recently, even though I am well informed about the possibilities, both in theory and practice. I'm currently on what's known as a default tariff, rather than one that's being fixed for 1 or 2 years ahead. It's capped by the government, not under the original RPI-X design from Littlechild, and it moves with a 3-month lag with the wholesale price of energy. And I'm not the only person who has reduced their activity. Fewer than half the number of households were changing supplier in December last year, compared with a peak switching in 2019. Perhaps other people like me know that the government will provide at least some short-term protection, so I needn't bother with the faff and the anxiety of choosing a new supplier, even though it is a pretty easy process. That means that the threat of losing customers and the reward from gaining new ones isn't as strong a discipline for suppliers as Littlechild had hoped. So, back to careful what we wish for, we may think we want a choice, but we also want to be protected, and are we prepared to put the energy into what is required to make that choice? By being less active in the market as individuals, we are reducing its power to help consumers as a whole. On the other hand, we do have some protection. And thinking this through for the tribute that I'm doing for Stephen Littlechild reminded me of another group who wanted protection of a rather different sort. The Old Testament readings for morning prayer recently have been following the story of Exodus. The people of Israel, subjected to slavery in Egypt, had longed to be free. And then they'd had to live through the disruption caused by all those plagues and punishments which God had sent to persuade Pharaoh to release them. Even though the Israelites weren't directly affected themselves, it must have been pretty unpleasant to live through all those frogs and locusts and to be blamed by their masters for being the cause. So they longed for freedom, and Moses and Aaron and Miriam led them through the Red Sea and liberated them from the pursuing Egyptians. But then they found there were some new challenges. No longer were their owners feeding them and giving them water, making sure they were strong enough to perform their tasks as slaves, and they soon began to grumble. "Weren't there enough graves in Egypt," they asked Moses, "that you need to lead us out here to die?" Freedom introduced those new needs and responsibilities. In the Israelites' case, they were met by God, but not necessarily in the ways they would have liked. Think of the manna which went rancid if they tried, perhaps quite sensibly, to get some extra days' supplies. The shape of the relationship between God and the Israelites was largely formed through the hardships and discussions in the wilderness after they were freed. So freedom certainly came at a cost to them. The Easter message also brings us freedom. Freedom from the laws which used to bind us, and mostly freedom from the burden of our own sin. But perhaps that freedom too brings responsibilities which we need to embrace more actively. While we hear of redemption and peace, there is a new ask or commandment: to love one another. That's not always easy to follow. And Jesus very explicitly sends us, as he was sent by his Father, to bring fullness of life to all people. Like our, quote, duties to make the energy markets work, this isn't always easy, and Jesus never tried to disguise the cost of following him. But he didn't make it a condition. He lived, he died, he rose again out of God's amazing and unconditional love. In atonement language, we do sometimes refer to him paying the price for our redemption and freedom. But unlike energy markets, there's no price tag for us. Just an invitation to respond by reflecting that same love in our daily lives and in the world at large. But as in energy markets, we may need to stay alert for opportunities that come our way. We may need to be ready to respond appropriately. Thank you for listening. Good luck with your energy bills. Good luck with your faith, and every blessing for the rest of your day.